Jim, what do young people worship today? What do they believe? What do they hang on to? What do they hope for?
I can't speak for young people, but probably a guess would be the same things they've always celebrated, just kind of a joy of existence, self-discovery, freedom, that kind of thing.
Well, there's always been a generation gap in every age, but the gap now seems to be much more of a definite cleavage. The young people today seem to feel and think differently. What do you think has brought this about?
So-called generation gap could be a result of larger numbers of young people. I think it happened after World War II. I think it's something like over half the population of the United States now is under 18 years of age, something like that.
Politically and philosophically, the young people now seem to feel very definite ideas about the establishment, old systems of governing people, and moral attitudes.
Yeah. When I was in high school and college, the kind of protest that's going on now was totally unheard of. At that time, to be a teenager, to be young, was really nothing. It was kind of a limbo state. And I think it's amazing, just in the last 5 years, what's happened is young people have come increasingly aware of the power and the influence that they have as a group. It's really amazing.
Does it surprise you that there is so much revolt on the campuses of this country against Washington and its policies?
It really surprises me because, as I said before, when I was growing up and when I was in school, that was totally unheard of. You know, students really had no power. But if you look back in history, it seems to bear out the fact that every revolution has started with students and spread to workers, and I'm not predicting there's going to be a drastic turnover in this country, but all the indications are there.
Life does seem to become more and more involved and complex. You know, we're becoming computerized and dehumanized in that process. That bugs me. I wonder how it bothers you and your generation.
There does seem to be a trend toward a return to a kind of primitive outlook on life, a more tribal attitude, and I think it's a natural reaction to industrialization, but unfortunately it's kind of naive, because I think the future is going to become increasingly mechanized.
All right. A lot of people don't know that all right from Matthew McConaughey is actually from Jim Morrison. And what you just heard was, it was from about 1970, believe it or not, because we're going to talk today about the young people and old people and how they look at each other. It was that long ago. Jim Morrison or James Douglas Morrison, was the lead singer for The Doors. He was also a great poet. Well, can you consider any poet great? I don't know. But for his time, he was a great poet, a great social figure. Really, you know, there's been social figures, I guess, all throughout history, but that was a time of social figures really coming into bloom, especially in music. You know, you had Elvis before that and the Beatles, but Jim Morrison was a pretty special kind of guy, very intellectual too. I'll go into some of that before I get rolling on the subject for today. But that all right. My buddy Troy, who's a guitar player, always wondered if it came from the Humble Pie song, 30 Days in the Hole. All right. But actually Matthew McConaughey, because it's from Dazed and Confused. Some of you might not know what the heck I'm talking about. His character in Dazed and Confused, which is a really cool movie and a cool character, comes up and says that. And he actually got it from listening to a bootleg. I don't know, maybe it wasn't a bootleg, but it was a live concert from The Doors where Morrison came out and said, all right. And he kind of stole it. Anyway, that's kind of a big roundabout way of giving you the history on the all right thing. I can go into more detail about that, but we'd have to be face-to-face in person, because these things are always interesting to me. And my buddy Troy, who's a guitar player, always finds these kind of things very interesting too. And I don't know if I've actually talked to him about that. I know where it came from, because we discussed where he thought it came from. Anyway, that's my lineup for James Douglas Morrison, who actually was a really smart guy. I'm going to go into that, but I'll just do a quick hit on the chicken or the duck. I mean the chicken or the egg, of course. The last episode where I kind of just rolled away there, and I don't think I'll say too much about it. I did get a lot of funny comments back on people saying whether they were the chicken or whether they the egg or whether they were both, or some of them told me what they ate for breakfast in the morning. Some of them, I think were clucking as they were typing. It was a lot of funny responses. And I think people may or may not have gotten it. There was a lot of depth to that concept. And I talked to a few people who I don't know if they really got the depth of it. And the real question always is whether I got the depth of it. Whether I understood what I was actually even talking about. Anyway, let's go back to Jim Morrison before we get into the subject, because he's leading us into this subject with that pretty astute and knowledgeable and having a lot of foresight with that recording I played of him. He was capable. People look at them, the Oliver Stone movie that came out, The Doors, was such a kind of fluffy kind of piece of work. It did the typical thing that happens in movies where it really hones in on all these wild things that people want to think about, these crazy rock stars. And it kind of, to me, it makes them all look a little foolish. Whereas there's a lot more going on. And with him, there was a way more going on than that movie ever dips into. And I guess it's hard with the movie. I mean, I can't blame someone making a 2-hour movie trying to make it entertaining. Unfortunately, it puts the idea of who the person was into people's minds, and it doesn't really represent them, I think, the way maybe they would want to be represented. Like my greatest Jim Morrison story to tell you, knowing from reading, because I was fascinated when I was 19 years old. I was just fascinated with him. I did a lot of LSD because of Jim Morrison, and that episode's coming up. But he, the one story that I always love to tell, that was in multiple books, cited by multiple people. When he was in college, his dorm room, or I guess it might not have been a dorm room, it was just a room he rented, but if you walked in, he had a full wall or multiple walls that had shelves across the entire wall filled with books. Now, he was into deep books, philosophical books, all the great philosophers, all the great poets. Big William Blake fan, of course. Ultimately, that's where the name of the band came from, even though it kind of came from Ray Manzarek, the keyboard player. But they were on page with that, of course. Aldous Huxley was part of that whole thing. If you know the history of it, you kind of know what I'm talking about. If you don't worry about it. great writers, great philosophers, great poets. He's got this wall filled with books, stacked, packed in. And if someone came in the room, he'd say, pick out a book, pick out a chapter, and read me the first sentence in that chapter. And they would do it, and he could tell you what book it was, who the author was, and what the chapter was that you were reading, apparently. Whether this is highly tested, I don't know, but there's a few stories of this. Whether it just happened to be a few magical cases, of course, that happens, and then we think, wow, this guy is just can do it all the time. But anyway, it's a great story to have, and it has been told. But what it does show is intellectually where he was at. A lot of the things he came up with, ideas for the Doors and how their shows were presented, how he went about creating the image of that band, were experiments he actually did during college, where he would go into crowds of protesters because there was so many protests at that time, and he would try to manipulate the crowd just by himself. Could have a few hundred people there, and he'd try to go in the crowd and manipulate the crowd by saying something, by doing something. That's the kind of mind he had. It was a little sinister. Well, shouldn't say sinister. Rascally, a little bit of a rascal. Alan Watts uses that word. He was a little bit of a rascal. True. But there's some really great interviews, if you poke around, where he is incredibly insightful, and he has a vision of the future that's pretty darn good. But what I did by playing that recording was to bring everybody in on what I'm going to talk about a little bit today, which is the enthusiasm of the young and the wisdom of the old. And that will put it in very positive terms. Because when I'm out there in the world, what I hear a lot is the opposite of positive when it comes to young and old. It's old people telling or talking about how stupid young people are and lazy. And it's young people not understanding old people and just thinking they're old and they have nothing going on, and they probably never had anything going on. In my honest views, it's generally what I see today. I can't say, or I won't say it's always the case, but what I see today, it's generally more older people being negative towards young people. Now, I'm an older person, so I'm not really in tune as much with younger people as being right in their crowd. But as has been the case through history, young people are just trying to figure things out. And older people through history have never gotten that. And I can't understand it for the life of me. I am constantly at odds with trying to understand people of my own age. And I've talked about this multiple times. In fact, right now I'm in massage school. I am learning the art. Well, I know the art of massage, but I'm learning the techniques needed to get a license to practice it publicly, okay? And I go a couple nights a week, and I go on a bunch of different weekends. And so there's a couple people my age in the class, and then there's mostly people younger than me, 10, 15 years younger than me, and then quite a few people 30 years younger than me. So it's really cool in a way because there's about 14 people in the class, and you have this cross-section, not only of age, but of nationalities, races, types of people, where they live, urban, rural. Well, I may be the only one that's really, I think I'm the only one from Hunterdon County, so I'm the only one that's really in a country kind of setting. Everyone is either in towns or cities, Newark, Bloomfield. If you know New Jersey, you know these towns. Plainfield, the schools in Westfield. And then I'm way out here in Milford on the border of Pennsylvania. So, but it's really interesting to see all the different people. And really right now, over the course of a solid month almost, people are starting to get to know each other, and there's no funny business. Everyone's very friendly and getting along and helping each other. And I think a lot of times when you get into a situation where you're learning something, especially learning something where pretty much everyone in the class is excited to learn this trade, whether they look at it as a trade or an art form. I tend to look at it more as an art form. Some people tend to look at it more like a skill for a job. And incredibly, everyone has a little bit different take. The teachers, great teachers at the school, their personalities really come out, and they all have a little bit different personalities. So it's great when you're learning, you get a little flavor of each one of those personalities, and they all have different skill sets. And it's amazing to see the different skill sets and the different approaches from the teachers, from each student, and everyone's sort of approaching this thing in their own way. And as they're learning it, they're already starting to sort of see where it could go. Me included in that, 100%. Learning the technique is very interesting. It's the part that's, very important, and really probably what it's all about. First off is technique, and then everything follows from there. But when you're learning something like that, where everyone's in tune with each other, the teachers are in tune with the inspiration of the skill, I do think people tend to get along more. And I don't know if all the classes, maybe our class is a little bit different, but it's the feeling I get, like everybody just tunes in with each other a little bit more. And every one of us students is a little bit off guard. We're all a little bit kind of on our heels, unsure of ourselves. So when you put a bunch of people in that position too, if everyone leans on each other a little bit, it ends up being a very cool thing. Anyway, I didn't mean to go in depth with what I'm doing there, but the point I'm making is, I don't hear a lot in this. I'm around young people in different ways quite a bit, but in here very evidently I am, and I don't hear too much funny business. I hear a little funny business here and there about older people. But when I'm with older people, like when I'm at the gym in the locker room in the morning, and I'm talking about people that are actually very comfortable people. They're at a gym that costs at least $100 a month to go to at 11 a.m. in the morning, and I hear them complaining about the world and complaining about young people, and I'm in shock sometimes of these things I hear. People in such a comfortable position with such a bad attitude towards the world and not understanding at all. And I go around and I see some of my friends. Once in a while I see my old friends from high school or something. And I listen to them talk. And I have a different relationship with some of them. So I could actually speak up. Because in general I don't. I won't do it at the gym. I won't get into confrontations. It doesn't have any real value to me to do that. But I'll say to them, I'll hear them say something about young people. Oh, young people, they don't do this, they don't. And then I hear them maybe talk at young people, talk at them with that same kind of attitude of, what are you doing, And I look at them like, do you not remember when we were young? How much we hated that, how much we hated older people telling us how it was and making us seem like we don't know anything and making us seem like, it was so better when they were young and we were just lazy. And it was not different. So if you're a young person listening to me, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give you the inside because you weren't there for it. You weren't born yet. When I was young and all the people around me, and I was a very observant person, all the people that are telling you this stuff now when they were young, I was there with those people. None of them were that fantastic. Take my word for it. They were all just like you, trying to figure things out, making mistakes, trying to act cool, listening to music too loud in our cars. And back then, he even partied more. I mean, kids today don't party the same way because it was easier for us to party because we didn't get in trouble the way young people would get in trouble for simple partying. I mean, there's some stuff that's more intense now than it wasn't maybe as intense, but probably part of the reason it wasn't as intense was because we had more freedom to let loose. So we could let loose in an easier way. Now there's not that freedom to let loose. Someone's on your back right away if you do anything if you're young. So then if you do something, it's like you do it to an intense level. I don't understand why people don't get that. But back then we got in trouble. We did bad things. Not horrible things. I mean, of course, some people did. But in general, I'm talking about just in general, we did all the same things. Different levels, yeah, okay. There wasn't so many people, dyeing their hair pink, okay. There wasn't so many people exploring different versions of themselves or talking about manifestation or coming up with crazy ideas that older, wiser people know, well, you're probably going to change that one. And they're right for thinking that, but they're wrong for their approach on how to say things to you. Because we were doing the same thing in a different way. Okay, so right off the bat, that's what I'm going to tell you. Older and wiser is true. When you get older, you will get wiser. You will settle down. You will settle in. You will start to use your mind. You have now seen more things, experiences, and you'll start to understand, really, to be honest, from your own mistakes more than maybe anything, maybe from other people's mistakes around you. It's like doing things wrong enough will start you to go, okay, look, I'm about to do that again. But sometimes it takes quite a bit to get to that point. But your mind will also develop in a certain way. It's hard to explain. I think it's a development thing, and you'll grow even more. And it'll be interesting to see younger people now growing, because I feel like they're more in, like, this current culture is more into growth than we were. When I was younger, we weren't talking about some of the things that we're all talking about now. So I think it will be interesting to see, but you'll also look back on some of the things you're doing and realize, and what you'll do is, instead of looking in the mirror and realizing, oh yeah, I should have assessed myself on that when I was younger, you'll end up assessing somebody young instead of yourself. So if you're a young person, the advice I would give you right now is start to assess yourself and be very self-assessing, so that you could break this little bit of chain. Because I hear people talk about breaking chains a lot right now, breaking family cycles. Well, don't just look at family cycles. And a lot of times when I hear young people say breaking a family cycle, it's because because what they're really saying, and this is the negative part that's coming from young people, is I need to break the cycle of what my parents put me through, which I know their parents put them through and they put them through, but I need to break this cycle of what they put me through so I could be this outstanding person. Well, that's you being negative towards them, because you don't know what that future is going to hold or how you're going to be represented to your children, if you have them, or young people. And they'll probably going to come up with things that you're doing wrong, and they'll be at another level. And unfortunately for you, it won't come across as being positive. It'll come across as you looking like you did something wrong. Okay, instead of this whole chain looking like, thank you for allowing me the position to move upward in this spiritual ladder. Because young people, that's what you should be saying to older people. Thank you for sacrificing yourself from what was before you so that I could be here to sacrifice myself for the next step. And none of it should really be a sacrifice. It really should all just be a way of moving forward. It should all be very positive. Like, we talked about the same things that young people talk about what our parents did, and we don't want to be like our parents. We want to be better. We want to do this. Well, our parents wanted us to be better, but they were also judgmental on us not carrying on some of the things. They had to be a little tougher than us, right? And now we felt like we're a little tougher than this next generation. Well, this next generation is going to feel they're a little bit tougher than the generation after that. But boy, this is, and I think it's a lot of the politicians right now. Unfortunately, all of them. I'm not going to say any one. I'm not going to say one side or the other. You're not going to hear me say any of that. But the good lot of them, and we could throw the media in there if you want, and I'm not going to go in deep with any of this stuff because I know everyone's got pretty intense opinions. But all of that is really putting a spotlight on that people are screwed up, young people are screwed up, ruining the country, lazy, not worth anything. Well, guess what? All you people telling them this, you're the ones responsible for it. They did not train themselves. You trained them. And if you want to point your finger around and say, well, I didn't do it, that person did it, or that person did it. Nope, don't work that way. If you want to be an American and you want to talk about American pride and you want to talk about American culture, then you got to put yourself right in that line, because that's what it was always about, to be American, to be together with other Americans and take responsibility for what happened. If all you want to do is blame somebody else for what's going on, then don't consider yourself an American. Please do not, because that has not been what it's been all about. And instead of doing that, let's try to lift up young people, older people. Let's try to lift them up and say, yeah, okay, you're different than I was. Things are different. We were part of making that happen. You're part of that making that happen. And let's move forward with a different attitude. Because when I say to people, go out into the world and self-assess yourself. Look at yourself first, right? And go out into the world, and when you see somebody, instead of saying, why are you doing this? Like the other day, someone was yelling at me from their car for something I still don't understand, what I possibly did wrong driving. And people are always ready to be in that negative mode. And then if you say, why don't we be in a positive mode where we see somebody and go, hey, I understand why you made that mistake, because I might have made that mistake too. Or, hey, all right, you're doing this and I don't like this, but that's okay. I understand that you're in a different place. If I suggest that to people, to have that attitude and make that the attitude of the world, people will look at me like I'm crazy. How could that possibly be? Well, guess what? The attitude of the world right now, of this kind of negative, walk all over people, tell people what they're doing wrong, insist that you're always right, it's also an attitude that's been developed in our culture. It was developed in the early 80s. Look, I'm not going to crucify anybody, but when Ronald Reagan came into office and we turned into a corporate style America, and that happened, I definitely, as a person being young, saw the country sort of change to more of a cutthroat, try to make it in business, whatever you got to do to make it in business. And it really wasn't that way in the 70s. In the 70s, it was much more cool. Everybody kind of like, okay, what are we doing? Let's not perfectly, of course. We still had this problem I'm talking about. And from Jim Morrison, you could tell from what he was saying that there was this and what the interviewer was saying to him. But it was a little different, and then it went to this other thing, and that's what's been developed. And there's no reason it can't be developed back into us having a little bit more courtesy towards each other. Stop listening to these upper forces telling you how awful everybody is, because I don't see it. I just don't see it out there. The only thing I see awful is when everybody is in that mode of looking at things awful. The moment anyone turned that around and looked at it in a different way, I think everything would be different. And, once again, don't go out there and say, Jay said it has to be this way. Because I don't think that anything has to be anyway. We could all figure out our own way of doing things. But I do want to say that if I could trade right now and be young again, I would. I would love to be young right now. I loved being young when I was young. I really did enjoy my youth, like, tremendously. And I remember all my friends saying how they wanted to get out of high school. They were dying to get out of high school to get into the world. And I used to go, what are you guys, crazy? This is like, do you not see? This is the greatest thing in the world. We have so much freedom. And I also wanted to be young during my brother's time. He's like 7 years older than me or so. And he was really in the 70s growing up. And I was in the 80s, and I really wanted to grow up in the 70s. I thought that was really cool, and I'm sure I would have liked the 60s. And I liked the 50s. I was a big James Dean fanatic when I was younger. I would always choose to be young, to experience the world as a young person. I'm not afraid of, like, since I've been a kid, there's always been talk about how the world's screwed up and it's like it's gonna explode any day. The world is gonna end any day now because of what's going on. It's unfathomable what's going on in the world right now, and so there must be complete destruction that's coming tomorrow. That has been the talk I remember since I was a kid. I'll be honest with you. Somehow it washes away and everybody forgets that they talked about in 1999 when the clocks turned to 2000, the computers weren't going to know what to do and the whole world was going to shut down. In 1985, Russia was going to drop a bomb on us and destroy the entire world. Of course, you had the Cuba crisis with Kennedy in the 60s. That was going to end things. And, of course, there was many empires that did fall through time. And I would wonder how people felt as that was approaching. Maybe we are approaching it. Whatever. As Jim Morrison said, I'm going to get my kicks before the whole shit house goes up in flames. And I guess I'm going to end things on that note because I am talking here and looking at the clock going, oh, I'm making this a longer one than usual, just talking away. But everyone enjoy themselves out there. Enjoy everyone around you. Enjoy people who are different than you. Be tolerant, but realize tolerance doesn't mean being tolerant to people who are like-minded. There's no test in that kind of tolerance. Tolerance is being tolerant to people you disagree with. That's the test of tolerance. If you want to be tolerant, you cannot judge your level of tolerance on people who agree with you, who you are like-minded with. To judge your tolerance, you have to see what you do around people who you thoroughly disagree with. Look at yourself in the mirror. Self-assess yourself based on that. And let's all just enjoy each other. Enjoy how different we are. Do our best to work our way through all of this business. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to be wrong. For everyone. So when you're looking out in the world and you feel that way about yourself and you say, hey, it's okay for me to make a mistake. When you look at someone else and you're about to say something negative to them, go, hey, it's okay for them to make a mistake. Let's all try not to hurt each other. All right. Pearls of wisdom. Rolling into the future. Young and wild. Old and wise. Thank you for listening, everybody.
Getting ready for that role, the first night, I went up for a dress rehearsal and hair and makeup, and I stepped out of the trailer, and Rick Linklater, the director, comes up and goes, this is great. Look like Wooderson, this is great. And he goes, listen, man, I know you're not supposed to work tonight, but we got a scene at the Top Notch. It's Friday night. You know, I think Wooderson might be there, you know, trolling for chicks or what have you, you know what I mean? And he goes, I go, yeah, he would be there. And he goes, what do you think, would Wooderson maybe be attracted to the redheaded intellectual? You know, because Wooderson's been around school. He's kind of been with all the typical beauties. What about the redheaded intellectual? You think he'd be into that? I was like, yeah. And I said, give me 30 minutes. Let me take a walk. And he goes, okay. So I took a walk. Come back. We played verbal ping pong. I told him my ideas, and he told me his. And he goes, want to shoot it? I went, okay. So boom, we go up to the set. I get in the car, and I'm nervous. First scene ever on film. And right before we're about to shoot, I've got friends in the car. I'm going, I've been listening to this live Doors album. And there's this, in between two of the songs, Morrison goes, all right, all right, all right, all right. You ever heard that recording?
Of course.
Right? The 4. All right, all right, all right, all right. So right before we're about to go, I'm like, what is Wooderson? What is Wooderson about? What's he about? And I go, man, he's about 4 things. He's about, you know, his car. He's about getting high. He's about rock and roll and picking up chicks. And I go, I'm in my car. I'm high as a kite. I'm listening to rock and roll. Action. And there's the chick. All right, all right, all right.
That's amazing.
3 out of 4.
That's fantastic.
Hey, listen, man. Listen, man. I don't know how many of you people believe in astrology. Yeah, that's right, baby. I am a Sagittarius. The most philosophical of all the signs. But anyway, I don't believe in it. I think it's a bunch of bullshit myself. But I tell you this, man. I tell you this. I don't know what's gonna happen, man. But I want to have my kicks before the whole shithouse goes up in flames. All right. All right.